behalf of the Work Better Now team, I'd like to welcome everyone to Working Better Now, a series on workbetternow.com featuring a Q&A with a successful business leader. And today, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Leanne Chu of Leanne Chu Consulting. Leanne, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Let's jump right in, Leanne. Tell us a little bit about your consulting business.
Sure. At the core of what I do is I help people move forward. It's just really very simple. I work with leaders and organizations to create an actionable and sustainable roadmap to help them move forward with clarity and confidence. I get involved in a lot of different types of topics, whether it's I'm starting up a new venture, I'm growing and scaling my business to the next level, or even have a strategy that I can't execute because I'm also focused on my day-to-day operations and I have no time. So that's kind of a lot of people. It could also be launching a new venture, M&A, and a lot even too is, do I even have the right team in place right now to get me where I'm going? Because that gets into a lot of staffing, leadership, and cultural issues. So for me to get my clients moving in their direction and execute their goals, I first have to help them remove their barriers and obstacles. And as we all know, we're way too close to what we do. So I'm going to provide that objective perspective to really get to the root of these obstacles and barriers. What is the scope and what's the impact of why we can't move forward? Our barriers are usually internal or infrastructure or around our environment. And a lot of it is around our own fears and our own doubts or discomfort. And that doesn't allow us to make the decisions that we need with that clarity. So it's important for me to partner with my clients to help them navigate and remove those barriers, because when they do, if you think about all of a sudden you're just lifted, you become very open and free to thinking about your path forward with a brand new perspective. You're more open to seeing new ideas and new solutions. So it's very important for me that roadmap is also going to work. I really take pride that when I'm working with my clients, that the roadmap is going to be adopted and it's going to be sustainable. And that really means I need to understand my client, their style, their starting point, their culture, because I work with inside of their system. And that determines approach, pace, and the degree of adoption that can be absorbed at any one time. And I really take pride in trying to empower and build within. I don't come with the ideas. I use an interactive facilitative style to really unearth a lot of the issues so that we're creating and we're solutioning together, and that we worry about change and adoption from day one.
Gotcha.
Not just when it's ready to execute, because that's really where we start to get into a lot of problems. So regardless of what your great ideas are, if no one's ever going to receive it on the other end, it's usually a failure.
Gotcha. So I have a whole bunch of questions around that, but before we go in that direction, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Sure. I started my consulting career at KPMG Consulting, and I was actually working across a variety of different industries and different size companies, but my focus was really around strategy development and execution, working with companies in some state of transformation and change. So that could be around operational improvement and also could even be involved large system implementations. I left because I didn't want to stay on the partner track. And I left at about maybe 2000, 2001. So I've been on my own for quite some time now. And I also am a certified solution-focused coach. So I combine coaching and consulting together in my approach because of everything I do is going to involve change. And so that's really where the marriage of those two skill sets come in for me.
Gotcha. We're going to come back. I want to come back to change in a second because there's so much of it going. The pace of change is just increasing so much right now. But before we do that, so you mentioned helping business owners and their businesses get over barriers and obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the common missteps that you're seeing, particularly, let's say, over the past 12 months?
What kind of barriers and obstacles? I think a lot is as the world has changed, are we adapting with the way the world has changed? I think this gets into a lot of different topics of what's our culture? Is our culture one of status quo, or is it one that can handle constant change? So if we look inside, a lot of it is how are we perceiving a lot of the change or barriers that we can't control. And so that's what I see right now in the last, like, say, 2 years. It's a kind of a change that's maybe not welcomed. And so how our leaders are, how they act and react is also going to be very much how the internal team takes on that change and that barrier. So it's when you think about the barriers, I think a lot of it is things that were maybe unwelcomed. It's going to be a lot in our staffing, in our culture, and those are things that I think are putting external forces on a workforce right now. And I think that there's too much uncertainty. That's a big part of it too. I'm so uncertain. I don't know what steps to take forward without feeling like I don't want to box myself in. So I think a lot of it is, can we feel comfortable knowing what we don't know and navigating what we don't know, but still keep moving forward?
Yeah. So can you, without mentioning company names and owner names, can you give me a couple of examples of a company that had and has great prospects, but they were a little stuck. There were barriers, there were obstacles, and I'm asking for you to do all of this in a couple of minutes, and then just briefly explain how you help them get past those obstacles
Sure.
and to the results they're looking for.
Okay. So I think when I come in to a situation, as I was saying in how I approach things, I really have to understand what's the vibe, what is the temperament, what is the attitude of what the environment is that I'm working in. So if I notice that the organizational structure and culture is where they don't like change, they don't like risk taking, they are there is also a lot of back channeling, meaning decisions are made, but it doesn't mean that they stick and they're not followed through upon. So for me, what I see is that for me, I need to then be able to work with leadership first to really understand what it is and why they approach their decision making the way that they do. Why are they coming? Because as I was saying, your employees are very much picking up on how you manage. So for me, I always have to start with leadership first because that is at the top. Their actions drive everything. It drives the culture, it drives decision making, and it really ultimately drives your identity in the end. But that's where really I will start. But I also, because I partner with my clients, as I said, I have a very interactive style. I need all the feedback that I can get. And that's where sometimes we're having very challenging conversations, but it's by unearthing and getting everything out. Are we realizing we're all in the same place? And it's working at a varying levels. I don't know if that really answers the question, but there was a client that was very stuck in their culture and it was their governance style. And I really had to educate them on how to build culture and how to manage differently. And there was a lot of leadership development that had to happen because they were not executing anymore. They were having about a year or two that they were not able to execute, and their clients they were starting to lose clients. So that's a really big part of, again, I think when I say culture, change, leadership, to me, they all have to go together.
Right. And in a situation like that example, what is it that more often than not that the business owner, as the leader of the business, that the business owner needs to change on their end in order to set up the company for success going forward?
I think for a leader, you have to be aware of what your habits and behaviors are and what your own leadership style is. If, for example, I was working with someone that wanted to exit their business because they had a leadership team that wasn't doing what they needed to be doing and they were getting burnt out. Well, that leader then, what I had to help them understand was that they have a very dominating style. They have a non-trusting style.
Right.
They don't like to delegate. So how are you really going to get your team to rise up with you if that is your style. So part of it was to get them to start experimenting. So what I do is to say, what's a goal that we want to achieve? We don't like that. If we don't like to always necessarily think we have to change ourselves, because that seems like therapy. So I work it around a different way, which is, what is a goal that you want to achieve and that's important to you? And I will help you recognize different styles or different ways of approach, because it's important for you to get it done. But that also allows you to change your behavior and become aware of what you're doing, when we can work on something that you can take from a session we have and immediately apply it.
So it sounds like you're helping the business owner evolve in a real world example with an actual tangible challenge or opportunity that they're facing at the time.
Correct, because otherwise it's too theoretical.
Yeah.
If I were to work with you, and sometimes people say, well, I worked with a business coach, but we worked, who has time to understand all their behaviors and have awareness when their house is on fire? Like, I need help right now. So I really tried to work on something that is a business goal. And through that, I can actually achieve different levels of change within inside an individual and awareness. And then once they can start adopting that, they can start seeing different results. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened with this leader. They started to realize that they needed to delegate and let go. So I helped build up what we needed to give him that degree of trust. And we communicated it to his senior leadership team, and they started stepping into the role. But also my challenge to him was, you can't say anything for 10 minutes. And every meeting, when something comes up, I need you to reframe, because you say something and everyone else quiets down.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is for them to recognize. And I had him as an experiment test it. And he recognized when he says something, the discussions usually stopped.
Yeah. That used to be me. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
So, you talked a little bit about culture, and obviously core values are a big part of that. And let's assume that the company has core values, which is usually the owner saying, I think this is what the core values should be. How does a company go from that to making those core values work? Whether it's a new business, let's put the new business aside. Let's talk about an existing business where you're rolling out core values. You're realizing, all right, I finally now understand that this core value stuff's really important. How do you roll it out and get it so that the company is actually living by those values?
Sure. Again, it comes back to the leaders. If they're going to write them, they have to own them. They have to live them, because they're setting the example. If you think about it, your core values are an ingrained set of principles that you are saying are going to guide all of my company's actions and decisions, right? And they're going to be tied to my goals and my strategy, which means there can't be a gap between what I say and what I do, internally, externally, and at all levels of the organization. So therefore, it's going to start establishing your cultural cornerstone and your company identity. So a leader has to set that tone and set that example. But if I want my employees to start living that and breathing that, so let's assume that the leaders are able to do that. We also have to make sure that those core values are also integrated into every employee related process. Those core values very much have to integrate into our hiring process, our review process in terms of how we develop our people's skill sets, how criteria for promoting and even termination. Because if you think about, if your employees are embodying all of that, then it's become part of your culture. It translates to your customer. An example might be, think about a family. You have parents and kids. If parents say something, but they don't really follow through, or they actually don't do what they say, well, kids can go, well, maybe I can kind of get away with that. So you really do have to stick and stay.
Kids don't kind of say that. They definitely say that.
Yeah. So I think that's, people can really internalize that when they look at their own family dynamics. And I think that's a lot where it's hard. It's very, very hard to do. But I think leaders need to be able to work together to make sure that when they think about the actions and decisions, what are our core values, and does that translate also to the customer? Am I going to be doing what I'm asking my employees to do? And that's a big part of it.
Good old leading by example. Let's change the topic a little bit. So culture, core values, obviously critical. I think companies are now realizing more important than ever. The other thing that's really important today is leveraging technology. At what point are you helping your clients figuring out if they have the right tech stack? And what are some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of what companies are doing right or wrong along the lines of their technology stack?
Sure. I think with technology, what I do is if there's a business problem we're trying to solve, and part of the barriers could be part of our operations, part of our process. And sometimes people may think, oh, it's an individual, it's a set of skill sets, but that may not be the case. I think we have to look at all of that in combination. We have to look at how we do what we do, and we have to really understand where does technology play in our end-to-end process with inside of our value chain. Because one thing we don't want to do is to shift the burden upstream or downstream. I think a lot of times a misstep is, when I get through with my clients, I'll think, well, I want to implement this X package, but they think it's going to be their silver bullet answer to answering everything. And that is not true. I think you have to be very honest about that it's not going to eliminate a lot of your underlying process and people inefficiencies. I think that is something where does technology have the place? Because technology ultimately is going to change what you do, how you do what you do, and who's doing it. And if you're not honest about what that is before you implement your system, you could be automating a messy process, or you could ultimately not have adoption of that technology, where if you don't get your users involved right away from the beginning, you don't understand where the skill gaps are or their resistance to it, and take out any of the inefficiencies, you're not going to get the return on investment of why you even selected the system to begin with. And that's happened where I've come in and someone says, we've implemented this and it's been an absolute failure. And you have to kind of go backwards and say, well, what did you do? You tried to automate your messy business rules into a system. Now I've customized it, not configured it. And now I'm paying for that. Yeah. So I think that's where, for me, when someone says they want to implement a system, I do ask them we work first on cleaning up the process first and thinking about the skill sets before, because technology is an enabler. That's really what it is. It's going to enable what you do. Think about messy inputs, process, it's just going to make it go faster.
Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah.
Yeah, you could think of the I Love Lucy episode, when she's on that chocolate manufacturing line and she just can't keep up. I mean, part of it is it speeds up. And that's the worst thing that could really happen.
Yep. People and processes first.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this discussion, Leanne. Oh, but one last question. Well, second to last question. What do you like to do when you're not working?
I am a very curious person by nature. I ask my clients a ton of questions, but I like to see how things work. So that leads me to traveling to places that are not very popular. Like one of my very enjoyable trips was going to like a place like Bhutan. It's not very popular. It's very hard to get to, but it is something where I like to immerse myself into places that I don't understand, because it allows me to kind of figure all that out. So travel is one. And I somehow started getting back into golfing after like 2006. Someone says, come to this networking event. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't dusted off these clubs. So I like to try to get out and do things of that nature as well. That and reading. I enjoy really a lot of different books because it gives me different perspectives.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks. And Leanne, where can people find out more about you?
Actually, I think the easiest is really through LinkedIn. I don't accept all of the invites. So I would say if you would like to connect, I would, tell me how we got to know each other through this. Mention your Work Better Now, and I would love to start a conversation and connect. So that's usually how it's easiest for me.
Fantastic. I'm the same way. If a message comes, an invite comes from somebody who I don't know without a message, I don't understand what they're hoping to accomplish. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes,
and
it is.
thanks so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to speak with the Work Better Now community. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.